Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we try to make complex topics a bit easier to grasp.
Yeah, hopefully.
Today we're cracking open a really key document for anyone involved in U.S. patents. It's the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPEP.
The examiner's playbook, essentially.
Exactly. Think of this as sort of a guided tour through the rules they use day in, day out.
And for this specific deep dive, we're zoning in on Chapter 2100. That chapter covers patentability.
Right, and within that.
We're looking closely at Section 2117. Our goal today is really to get a handle on something called Markush Claims.
Markush Claims.
Yeah.
Okay, sounds a bit technical.
Yeah.
So what are they and, why should we care if we're trying to understand patents?
Well, imagine you've invented something, but it's not just one specific thing. It could be a whole group of related things that kind of work the same way.
Okay, like variations on a theme.
Exactly. A Markush claim is this special format you use in the patent application. It lets you list out these alternatives. Usually you see the phrase selected from the group consisting of.
I think I've seen that phrase before.
Yeah, it's pretty common. It's basically a way to claim a whole family of related inventions all at once.
Right, so instead of just claiming, say, one specific chemical in a new glue.
You could potentially list several similar chemicals that all get the job done, give you that bonding you want.
Makes sense. Where do these typically pop up? Is it mainly one field?
You see them very often in chemistry, definitely. Pharmaceuticals, material science. Anywhere you might have a set of related compounds or, different types of polymers maybe.
Like that glue example.
Right, or a new drug where several variations might be effective. But interestingly, you can sometimes see them in mechanical inventions too, or even processes.
Really? How would that work?
Well, maybe there are alternative parts that could be swapped in, or different steps in a manufacturing process that achieve basically the same result. It's less common, but it happens.
Okay, got it. Seems like it could offer broader protection then. Now, the MPEP apparently stresses that these claims define a closed group. What does that mean, practically?
That closed group part is super important. It means exactly what it sounds like. The patent claim only covers the specific things you listed in that group.
Nothing else.
Nope. If you discover another variation later, maybe something similar that also works but it wasn't on your list, well, it's not protected by that specific claim. It's not open-ended at all.
Got it. So you have to be quite careful about what you include. It's a defined set.
Yeah.
Okay, so MPEP Section 2117. It must lay out rules for how to build these groups properly. What's the main principle we need to wrap our heads around?
The absolute core rule is this. For a Markush group to be proper, the alternatives you list have to meet two conditions, not just one. Two.
Okay, what are they?
They need to share a single structural similarity, and they must have a common use or function.
Structural similarity and common use. Both.
Both are essential, and it's not just, some administrative detail. It's fundamental. It ensures the patent claim is actually defining one cohesive invention, not just lumping together unrelated ideas that happen to share some superficial trait.
Right, prevents overreach.
Yeah.
Can you give us a simple, clear example? What would a proper group look like?
Sure. Imagine a chemical compound, right? And maybe you can swap out one part of it, let's say a hydrogen atom, for one of three simple things. A methyl group, a propyl group, or a butyl group.
Okay.
Now, methyl, propyl, butyl. These are all small alkyl groups, basically little chains of carbon and hydrogen. Chemically related, that's your structural similarity.
Right, they're all in the same chemical family.
Exactly. And in the context of that larger molecule, they're probably all doing a similar job, maybe affecting solubility or how it reacts in a similar way. That's the common use. Same family, similar role, that works.
Okay, that makes it very clear. Related structure, related function. Now let's flip that. What happens when a Markush group doesn't meet both of those requirements? Let's dig into what makes a grouping improper.
Yeah, this is where the trouble starts, where examiners will push back. An improper grouping is basically one where either the listed things don't share a clear unifying structure, or they don't all genuinely share a common use. One or the other is missing. Or maybe both.
Can you give us an example of a claim that would likely get flagged as improper?
Okay, think about herbicides, weed killers. Imagine a patent claim trying to list several different chemicals as the active ingredient.
All right.
But maybe the list includes one chemical that works by, destroying cell walls, another messes with photosynthesis, and a third one mimics plant hormones.
Okay, those sound very different chemically and biologically.
They are. They might all kill weeds, broadly speaking, but they are structurally diverse, they target different kinds of weeds maybe, and they work through totally different mechanisms. There's no real structural thread connecting them, and the common use of just killing weeds is probably too broad given how differently they function.
I see. So the underlying science is too different.
Exactly. That kind of grab bag approach. Likely to be rejected as an improper Markush group.
Makes sense. It's not just about the end result. Now, the MPEP isn't written in a vacuum, right? It reflects how courts have interpreted patent law. How much does case law factor into these Markush decisions?
Oh, hugely. Case law is absolute critical here. The USPTO relies heavily on court decisions to provide, real-world context and interpretation of these rules.
So the MPEP guidance is built on those legal precedents.
Pretty much. These cases show how abstract principles like structural similarity and common use have actually been applied in specific disputes. They provide the practical grounding.
Are there any specific cases the MPEP points to for Markush claims, ones we should maybe know?
Yes, definitely. Section 2117 specifically mentions a couple of key ones, like In re Harnish and Ex parte Hozumi.
Harnish and Hozumi. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they're important because they really illustrate how courts analyze these things. Like, can one alternative genuinely substitute for another? Does the shared function actually stem from some common underlying structure? These cases help examiners and applicants, too, understand the nuances. It's not just a checklist.
Right. They provide the why behind the rules. Now, when an examiner looks at a Markush claim, are they just focused on that list of alternatives, or is there more to it? Let's talk about this whole compound perspective.
That's a really important point, especially with chemical inventions. You absolutely cannot just isolate the Markush group itself and judge it alone.
So context matters.
Immensely. The examiner has to look at the entire patent claim. How does that list of alternatives actually fit into the bigger picture, the larger molecule being claimed, or the overall process?
So the rest of the molecule, or the other steps in a process, can actually make a Markush group okay, even if the listed things seem a bit different on their own.
Precisely. You might have alternatives that, if you just looked at them in isolation, seem quite distinct, maybe even from different chemical classes.
Okay.
But if they all share some significant structural feature, and that feature is essential for achieving the common purpose described in the claim, then the group might still be perfectly fine.
Interesting. Can you give an example where that might happen? Different things grouped together legitimately.
Sure. Think back to the Harnish case we mentioned. It involved dyes. Imagine you have various chemical compounds, right? And they all work as dyes.
Okay, different colors maybe, different structures.
Potentially quite different overall structures, yes. But let's say they all contain a specific identifiable core structure, like a coumarin core, which is known to be important for color in some dyes.
Ah, so a common building block inside them.
Exactly. That shared coumarin core provides the necessary structural similarity. And their common utility is clear. They all function as dyes because of, at least in part, that core. So even if the rest of the molecule around the core varies a lot, that shared essential feature linked to the common function can make the Markush group acceptable.
That's a great example. It's not just any similarity, but a critical one tied to the function.
Yeah.
Okay, so what if the examiner looks at it, considers the whole compound, everything, and still concludes the Markush group is improper? What are the consequences for the applicant?
Well, the most direct consequence, usually, is a rejection of that patent claim.
Right, a rejection. That's obviously a setback. What else might happen?
The examiner could require the applicant to make an election of species.
Election of species, what's that?
It means the applicant has to pick just one specific alternative from their list as one species, and the examiner will focus the examination just on that one.
And the others?
The others might get put aside for that application. The applicant might have to file separate applications called divisional applications to pursue them, which, means more cost, more time.
Okay, so it can really narrow the focus and complicate things?
Yeah.
What if the applicant wants to try and fix the claim to keep the group together somehow?
Well, the examiner might suggest amending the claim. You could try breaking the improper group into several separate proper groups, each in its own independent claim.
So multiple smaller claims instead of one big one.
Right. Or you might use dependent claims, where you have a main claim and then other claims that narrow it down to specific subgroups, basically restructuring to meet the rules.
Okay, breaking it down. Are there other reasons a bad Markush claim might get rejected, besides just being an improper grouping?
Yes, potentially. There's another part of the patent law, 35 U.S.C. Section 112B, which requires claims to be definite.
Have a definiteness.
Exactly. If a Markush group is just too sprawling, too vague, and lacks that clear unifying structure or function, it can make the entire claim unclear. Someone skilled in the field might not be able to figure out exactly what's covered and what's not.
So it fails the clarity test.
Right. If the boundaries are too fuzzy because the group is ill-defined, the claim can be rejected for being indefinite.
So clarity is key, not just avoiding lumping unrelated things. Now, going back to those cases, we talked about harnish and the dyes. What about that other one, ex parte dams? Did that offer any different insights?
Yeah, dams is interesting too. In that case, the board actually overturned the examiner's rejection. The Markush group was pretty broad, quite extensive.
But it was allowed. Why?
Because, despite the breadth, the board found there was enough underlying structural similarity connecting all the alternatives. It showed that broadness itself isn't automatically fatal.
As long as the connection is there.
Right. As long as there's a genuine structural relationship underpinning the group, even a large list might be acceptable. So dams emphasizes structural consistency, while harnish highlights how a key structural feature linked to a common function can justify breadth.
It's a real balancing act then. Breadth is possible, but it needs that solid foundation in structure and function. Okay, let's step back a bit. Why is getting these Markush claim rules right so important in the grand scheme of the MPEP and just, patent law generally?
Well, looking closely at Section 2117, this really shows you what the MPEP is trying to do overall. It's about providing clear, consistent guidelines for examiners.
Standardizing the process.
Exactly. How to evaluate applications according to the law and establish practice. By spelling out the rules for Markush groups, the MPEP helps ensure fairness and predictability, especially in those really technical fields we talked about, where inventions often have lots of variations.
And for the inventors, the companies, why does constructing these claims properly matter so much?
Oh, it's absolutely vital, both for actually getting the patent granted in the first place and for being able to enforce it later on, especially in chemistry, pharma, material.
Where these variations are common.
Right. A well-drafted Markush claim gives you reasonably broad protection covering the important variations of your invention, but it's also defensible because it meets these structural and functional requirements.
And a bad one.
A poorly constructed one. It could get rejected outright during examination, or even if it squeaks through, it might be vulnerable to challenges later if someone tries to invalidate the patent. Your claim is really the heart of your patent rights.
Absolutely. Clear claims, strong patent.
Yeah.
Now, this whole series, this effort to break down the MPEP, it's quite an undertaking. We should probably mention the person guiding this project.
Yes, absolutely. We should definitely acknowledge the creative direction of Mike Shepard. It's his vision and coordination that's really making this MPEP audio series possible.
Turning dense legal text into something more digestible.
Exactly. Helping people access this information. His work's been essential in getting this off the ground and shaping it.
And it's interesting, too, how technology is playing a role in creating these summaries.
Yeah, it's worth noting, as we have before, that AI tools like ChatGPT and NotebookLM were used to help generate the initial summaries of these MPP sections that we're discussing.
Kind of leveraging new tools to make complex info more accessible.
Right. It's part of the effort.
Which leads us, as always, to a very important point, our standard disclaimer.
That's right. We need to be really clear. While we hope this discussion is informative and helpful, it is purely for educational purposes. It is not legal advice.
Definitely not.
For any specific patent question or situation you have, you absolutely must consult the official MPEP text itself, talk to a qualified instructor, or ideally get advice from a registered patent attorney or agent.
Please do. This is just a starting point for understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive into Markush Claims, MPEP 2117 High, what's the single biggest takeaway message for our listeners?
I think the core idea is that balance. A proper Markush claim isn't just a list, it's a carefully constructed group where the alternatives truly share a meaningful structural similarity and a genuine common use. You need both, guided by the MPEP and how the courts have interpreted things. It's about defining a coherent, inventive concept.
A related family, not a random collection.
Precisely.
And looking forward, it feels like these principles aren't going away, especially with how fast some fields are moving.
No, absolutely not. Think about areas like, say, combinatorial chemistry, where scientists can generate huge libraries of related molecules very quickly, or advanced material science. It really makes you wonder.
Wonder what?
Well, how will these established principles for Markush claims continue to be applied? How might they evolve to handle these increasingly complex, massive sets of potential alternative that new technologies are generating.
That's a really interesting question. How do you draw the lines for structure and function when dealing with potentially thousands of candidates?
Exactly. It's something the USPTO and the courts will likely continue to grapple with. How do these rules adapt to new scientific realities?
Definitely food for thought. Something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over. If you want to explore this further, we really do recommend checking out Chapter 2100 in the MPEP and maybe looking up some of that case law like Harnish and Dams.
It's a fascinating and really practical area of patent law, and please join us next time as we continue our journey through the MPEP. We'll tackle another key section.
Until then, thanks for tuning in to The Deep Dive.